that moment when you pick up a rosary and part of you wonders if you're just going through motions. Like maybe you're saying words into the air and hoping something on the other side is listening. I felt that for years. I'd pray the rosary because I was told it mattered, because it was tradition, because good Catholics do it. But I didn't know what was actually happening. Not really. Not until I started reading what Padre Pio said about it. And once I understood, I couldn't see the rosary the same way again. So today, I want to share with you what Padre Pio taught about what happens the exact moment you begin to pray those beads. Because it's not what most people think. It's not passive. It's not symbolic. According to this saint who bore the wounds of Christ on his own body for 50 years, the rosary does something. And that something begins the instant your fingers touch the first bead. Padre Pio called the rosary the weapon. Not a weapon like we think of weapons today. Something that harms or destroys. He meant it the way a shepherd means a staff, the way a surgeon means a scalpel, a tool that does exactly what it was designed to do. He said that without the rosary, we are defenseless. I know that sounds dramatic, but Padre Pio didn't speak in metaphors just to sound holy. He lived in a world where the spiritual battle was as real to him as the physical one. He saw demons. He fought them. He bled from wounds that had no medical cause. And he said over and over again that the rosary was the one thing the enemy could not withstand. In one letter he wrote to a woman who was being tormented by evil thoughts, he told her this: hold the rosary during temptation, because the demons cannot bear the touch of a Maria spoken through fingers that love Mary. Not fingers that are perfect. Not fingers that have never sinned. Fingers that love Mary. That's all. The woman's name was Graziella. And according to her daughter's testimony, years later, the tormenting thoughts stopped within 3 days. 3 days of holding the beads and saying the words. Even when she didn't feel anything, even when it seemed like nothing was happening, but something was happening. Padre Pio knew it, and now she knew it too. So what actually happens when you pray the rosary? Let's start with the first thing. The moment you make the sign of the cross and touch that crucifix, you are not alone anymore. Padre Pio told a seminarian in 1965 that when someone prays the rosary, the Blessed Mother kneels beside you. Not in some abstract spiritual sense. She kneels beside you, and together, he said, you hand each bead to the Father as intercession. Every single bead. You were married side by side, holding up these prayers like offerings. I don't know about you, but that image changed everything for me, because it means the rosary is not me trying to get God's attention. It's me joining something already happening. Mary is already praying. She's already interceding. The rosary is me stepping into her prayer, letting her teach me how to pray the way she prayed when the angel came to her. When she stood at the foot of the cross, when she waited in the upper room for the Spirit to fall. The rosary isn't my work. It's her work, and I get to participate. And here's the part that makes my heart beat faster. Padre Pio said that every bead, every single Maria releases a soul from purgatory. He didn't say it might release or could help or we hope it does something. He said it does. His spiritual director, Father Agostinino, documented this. Padre Pio prayed up to 40 rosaries a day. 40. That's 200 mysteries. 3,000 Hail Marys. And he said that each one of those prayers pulled a soul out of suffering and brought them into the presence of God. Think about that. You pray one rosary. That's 53 Hail Marys. If you're counting the opening prayers, 53 souls in one rosary. You pray a rosary today, and 53 people you've never met, who lived and died and are waiting in purification, are released because you picked up those beads. I don't care how tired you are. I don't care how distracted your mind gets. If that's true, and Padre Pio staked his entire reputation on it being true, then there is no such thing as a wasted rosary. But there's more. Because Padre Pio also talked about what the rosary does inside you. Not just for others, not just for the souls in purgatory, for you right now in your body, in your mind, in your heart. There was a study published in the British Medical Journal in 2001. A medical doctor named Luciano Bernardi wanted to know what happens physiologically when people pray repetitive prayers. So, he studied people praying the rosary at the traditional pace. And here's what he found. When you pray the rosary, your breathing naturally synchronizes to about 6 breaths per minute. That's slow. Most of us breathe 12 to 20 times a minute when we're resting. But 6 breaths per minute is something called the Barrow reflex cycle. It's the body's natural rhythm for deep healing. It's the state your nervous system enters when it feels completely safe. Your heart rate stabilizes. Your blood pressure drops. Stress hormones decrease. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you designed to heal and restore, activates fully. This isn't mystical, it's measurable. The rosary prayed at the rhythm. The church has prayed it for centuries. Put your body into a state of healing. Padre Pio knew this without a medical study. He told people that the rosary heals, and hundreds of pilgrims who came to San Giovanni Rotondo reported spontaneous cures after praying the rosary in his presence. Cancers disappearing, paralysis reversing, addictions breaking. Not because Padre Pio was magic, because the rosary does what it was designed to do. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but I pray the rosary and I don't feel anything. I say the words and my mind wanders. I lose count. I forget which mystery I'm on. I fall asleep halfway through. Does it still count? And here's what Padre Pio would say. Yes, it counts. Because the rosary isn't about your performance. It's about your yes. It's about the fact that you picked it up. The fact that you started. Even if you don't finish. Even if you stumble through every word. Even if you're distracted the whole time. Mary knows. She's still kneeling beside you. She's still handing those beads to the Father. Your effort, however imperfect, is enough. Padre Pio said that neglecting the rosary is like refusing your mother's hand when she reaches for you in a storm. He didn't say you have to pray it perfectly. He said, don't refuse her hand. That's it. Don't refuse. Pick it up. Start. Let her do the rest. And then there's this, the 54-day rosary novena. Padre Pio endorsed this practice more than almost anything else. It's 27 days of praying the rosary in petition, asking for something specific, followed by 27 days of praying in thanksgiving, even if you haven't seen the answer yet. 54 days total. Padre Pio's confessor documented case after case of people who completed this novena and saw impossible things happen. Terminal diagnosis reversed. Marriages restored after decades of separation. Addictions that had destroyed lives for years broken in a matter of weeks. And there was no medical explanation, no psychological intervention. Just 54 days of the rosary. Padre Pio said that the Rosary is the telescope through which we see eternity. He wrote that in a letter in 1962. A telescope, not a magnifying glass that makes small things look bigger. A telescope that lets you see things that are already there, but too far away to perceive with your natural eyes. When you pray the Rosary, you're not creating something new. You're seeing what's already true. You're seeing the reality of heaven intersecting with earth. You're seeing Mary's intercession. You're seeing the mercy of God poured out in a way that doesn't depend on your worthiness or your eloquence or your focus. It depends on the yes you said when you picked up the beads. I want to tell you about something that happened to me a few years ago. I was in a season of deep doubt. Not about God exactly, but about whether my prayers mattered. I felt like I was shouting into a void. I'd pray and nothing would change. I'd ask and hear nothing back. And one night I was so frustrated, I almost put my rosary in a drawer and left it there. But something stopped me. I don't know if it was grace or stubbornness or just habit. But I picked it up and I prayed 1 decade. That's it, 10 Hail Marys, and I didn't feel anything. No peace, no warmth, no sense of presence, just words. But the next day I prayed another decade, and the next day another. And somewhere around day 12, I realized something had shifted. Not in my circumstances, those were the same. But in me, the panic was quieter. The anger was softer. I didn't feel alone anymore. I can't explain it better than that. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a steady, quiet presence that grew the more I prayed. And I remembered what Padre Pio said. The Rosary is the weapon. It does something whether you feel it or not. And that became my anchor. Now let's talk about what happens in the unseen when you pray. Because Padre Pio didn't just talk about the Rosary's effects on earth. He talked about what happens in the spiritual realm. He said that every time you say a Hail Mary, heaven responds. Not eventually, not someday, right? Then the angels attend. The saints join in. Mary herself lifts that prayer to her son. And the demons, Padre Pio said, flee. They can't stay. The Rosary is unbearable to them. He described it once as a chain that binds them. Every bead is another link. And the more you pray, the tighter the chain becomes until they have no choice but to leave. I think about that when I'm praying for someone who's in darkness, someone who's trapped in addiction or despair or sin that feels unbreakable. I think about the fact that my rosary is binding the enemy's power over them. Not because I'm special, not because I'm holy, because the rosary itself is a weapon, and I'm wielding it the way Padre Pio taught me to. Here's another thing Padre Pio said. He told people that if they wanted to know whether their prayers were working, look at the resistance. If you find it hard to pray the rosary, if you keep putting it off, if you start and get interrupted, if you feel an inexplicable heaviness or distraction every time you pick it up, that's the sign it's working. Because the enemy fights what threatens him. He doesn't waste energy on things that don't matter. If he's fighting your rosary, it's because your rosary is doing damage. Padre Pio said, the more resistance you feel, the more you should press in. Don't stop because it's hard. Pray because it's hard. That's when you know you're hitting the target. And let's talk about the mysteries themselves. Because Padre Pio didn't just pray the rosary mechanically. He meditated on the mysteries. He lived them. When he prayed the sorrowful mysteries, he wept. People who prayed near him could hear it. He wasn't pretending. He was entering into the passion. He was standing with Mary at the foot of the cross. He was watching the scourging, the crowning with thorns, the nails driven through flesh. And he said that when you meditate on the mysteries, you're not just remembering events from 2,000 years ago. You're participating in them. The mysteries are outside of time. They're eternal. So when you pray the agony in the garden, you are in the garden. When you pray the resurrection, you are at the tomb. You are there. And Mary is showing you what she saw, what she felt, what she knew. That's why the rosary isn't boring. It's not repetitive. It's a door. And every time you pray it, you walk through that door into a moment that has the power to change you. I think one of the biggest lies we believe is that the rosary is for old people, or for people who have time, or for people who are already holy. Padre Pio would laugh at that. He gave rosaries to soldiers, to children, to people who had never prayed a day in their life. He told a young man once, if you don't know how to pray, just hold the rosary and say the words. Mary will teach you the rest. You don't need to understand every mystery. You don't need to feel every prayer. You just need to start. And the transformation doesn't happen because you're doing it right. It happens because Mary is doing it with you. She's the one who makes the rosary powerful. Not your effort, not your focus, her. There's a story from San Giovanni Rattando about a woman who came to Padre Pio in desperation. Her son was dying. The doctors had given up. She asked Padre Pio to pray for him. And Padre Pio looked at her and said, have you prayed the rosary for him? She said, no. She'd been too scared, too anxious, too focused on finding a miracle somewhere else. And Padre Pio told her, go home and pray the rosary. Don't stop until you pray the full novena. 9 days, she did. And on the 9th day, her son woke up. The fever broke. The infection cleared. The doctors called it inexplicable. But Padre Pio wasn't surprised. He knew what the rosary does. He'd seen it 1,000 times. And he spent his life trying to get people to pick up the beads and see it for themselves. So here's my question for you. What would happen if you prayed the rosary every day for the next 54 days? Not perfectly, not with complete focus, just prayed it. What would change? What enemy stronghold would break? What soul would be released from purgatory? What healing would begin in your own heart? Padre Pio said, the rosary is the telescope through which we see eternity. What if he's right? What if every bead you pray is doing something you can't see yet, but will one day understand completely? What if the reason your life feels so hard right now is because you're fighting a battle without the weapon you were given? I'm not saying the rosary is magic. I'm saying it's sacramental. It's a channel of grace. It's a participation in Mary's intercession. And Padre Pio, a man who saw the unseen, who bore the wounds of Christ, who spent 50 years in intimate union with God, said it's the one thing we can't afford to neglect. So maybe today is the day. Maybe today you pick up the rosary, not because you feel like it, not because you understand it, but because a saint who knew what he was talking about said it matters, said it works, said it's the weapon. And maybe you pray 1 decade, and tomorrow another, and the day after that another. And maybe 54 days from now, you look back and realize that something shifted. Not because you're special, because the rosary is. Padre Pio prayed 40 rosaries a day, 40 until the day he died. He didn't do that because he had nothing better to do. He did it because he knew. He knew what happens when you pray the rosary. He knew the souls released. He knew the demons bound. He knew the healings unleashed. He knew Mary kneeling beside him, handing every bead to the Father. And he wanted you to know it too. So, this is me telling you what Padre Pio told everyone who would listen. Pray the rosary. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until you have time. Don't wait until you understand. Pick it up. Start. Let Mary do the rest. Because according to Padre Pio, that's when everything changes. The moment you say yes to the beads, you say yes to the weapon. And the weapon never fails.